The next part we're going to talk about is transportation and mining. What's really cool about what we're going to do for the rest of this week is it's going to be talking about connections, making the world a smaller place, and reducing the isolation people feel. We can identify and relate to that today, getting rid of that isolation and that feeling of being alone and having no one else around. So that is really cool because it really is pertinent to what we are experiencing right now. So the first thing we're going to talk about is freighting companies. So freighting companies, it's called Russell, Majors, and Waddell, and that is the three guys that it's named after. The three of them come together and they create these companies, freighting companies, stagecoaches, people who are going to bring things across the country. They're going to be moving not only supplies, but also mail. So imagine that you move out to Utah, but not all of your family does. The only way to communicate with them is snail mail. And I call it that lovingly because it's slow. That's why one of your challenges this week is to write some snail mail, put a stamp on it, and send it out, is because that is what is happening at this time. They would take like the entire summer to get one loop from St. Louis to Utah and back. The thing with this is it's crazy dangerous. So that would be about the size of a party. Okay, so usually mules, sometimes horses who would pull it, a couple of people with them. Not very many. The stagecoach is going to be full of supplies and the things that they're bringing, whether that be mail or whatever else. Some of the things that they would have to go through and experience to get this process done: storms, flood, the roads going bad, bridges, if there were bridges, if not, they'd have to find a route around, Native Americans straight up attacking them because they didn't want them there. And like I told you just a second ago, is that full trip could take an entire summer. That means if you want to write and see how your family's doing, you would send it now and hear from them maybe in September. But then if you wanted to write back to them, it might not get there until the next summer, because who knows when they're going to turn around and come back, because they're not going to be doing this through the winter. So it was crazy dangerous to do all of this. They kept doing it because there's huge amounts of money. These are things that no one else can get any other way unless they were to hike across themselves. So they pay a lot of money for them, and so they earn a ton of money. Probably my favorite thing about this is the term shotgun. Who's called shotgun in the car? Going out to the car, you want to sit up front by the driver, you yell shotgun. Do you know where that comes from? That comes from these freighting companies, because the person who sat by the driver in the front had a shotgun to fend off anyone who was either trying to come and attack them like the natives sometimes would, or if robbers came. If the robbers came and tried to loot them and take their stuff, then that person with the shotgun, it was their job to keep them safe. That's why you call shotgun. So it's got to be incredibly frustrating to know that there's things going on at home and wanting to communicate with home, but knowing that at best you might be able to get 2 letters from your family in a summer. So they had to come up with a better idea to make things a little bit faster. So pretty soon they have this brilliant idea and they call it the Pony Express. The Pony Express is just what it sounds like. They use ponies to get things across the country in an express manner. So really fast. Really fast. It would take them, instead of being all summer, it would take them 10 days. So we're looking at the red path there. So 10 days to get from St. Louis to California. Things would have to work a lot different in order for that to happen. So this is how they did it. Every 10 miles, they'd have a relay station. So they would dead sprint their horses, dead gallop for 10 straight miles. Okay, just imagine how much like exertion that would be on that horse's part for 10 straight miles. So at that 10-mile mark, the rider would stop and get a fresh horse. Then the rider would get 2 minutes to get a drink, and get some food, like a piece of bread. We're talking like simple food. And if you happen to have to go to the bathroom, 2 minutes, that's all you get. Then you're back on the fresh horse and you're sprinting again. You have to do this 8 times as a rider. After the 8th time that you switch horses and do that 8th run, then you as a rider get a break. So as a rider, you're going 80 miles. That is a lot of miles to cover in a day on horseback. Okay, like the freighting and like those stagecoaches we just talked about, crazy dangerous. That poster that you're looking at there for the Pony Express is wanting young, skinny, wiry fellas, not over 18, must be expert riders willing to risk death daily, orphans preferred. Why in the world would they prefer orphans? This is something we're going to talk about quite a bit. This is what we talked about with mountain men. If someone was to get attacked, which often they were attacked as they're doing this, do they want to deal with family? No, of course they don't. If they're going to have a rider die, they want it to be like, oh man, that sucks. I'm so sorry. Moving on. They don't want to have to deal with family and answering questions for family. And there's a lot of orphans at this time who would gladly take the money and the danger. So the Pony Express did this. They did it from April 1860 to October 1861. Can you think of what would have stopped the Pony Express? What would have stopped it? The telegraph. So the telegraph is what essentially killed the Pony Express. And that is because this is an instantaneous thing. It didn't take 10 days. It took like 10 seconds, if that, to do it. So what they did is they created a line from Nebraska to California. This required poles with wires on them. It looked like telephone poles today, but they were telegraph wires. And so they had 2 companies working on the telephone poles, telegraph poles, kind of like with the railroad, how they had the 2 companies working and met in the middle. Once this happened, then they did that first telegraph to test it out. They use Morse code, which is the series of dots and lines, the beep, 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 beep. That is Morse code. It was named after the guy who created it, whose last name was Morse, M-O-R-S-E, Morse. And it's like the OG text messaging. If you guys have ever sent a text, this is where kind of that originated. And of course, this is going to be way simpler, way cheaper to do than Pony Express. So the Pony Express stopped operating then. Brigham Young did send a telegraph, and after he did, he's like, man, that was crazy good, which I'm sure those are his exact words. You can quote me on that. And so from that point, he's like, we need to get these from Salt Lake to all of the settlements so that if I need to get anything or talk to any of these people in any of these settlements we've created, I can do it instantly. And that would have cleared up things like the Mountain Meadow Massacre. So they're feeling all tech savvy and all happy about their choice to get this set up. Okay, next up comes this place called Camp Douglas. Camp Douglas is another military station. This military station's sole purpose at this point in time was to protect the telegram poles and lines, because the natives really like to burn them down and take them down because they didn't ask them if it was okay to put them where they put them. And so sometimes it went through areas of theirs that they didn't want it there, and they didn't like feeling like they were being oppressed and that their land was taken away and stuff like that. So there was different tribes who would go and try and burn them down and do that, which would take down that whole telegraph system. So they were there to protect that. Okay, now we're going to switch gears a little bit and we're going to talk about mining. Mining is a huge deal in Utah, especially during this time. So this first mine we're going to talk about is called Bingham Canyon, Kennecott Copper. It's got a couple of different names that it goes by. This is a mine that is still used today. I don't know if you guys noticed because you weren't in my room for too long, but I have a 3D map of this right inside my door when you walk in. And it is so cool. It is so massive. I hope that these pictures kind of let you feel the scale of it. So the one on the top left, if you look right below the landslide there, you can see a bunch of buildings. Those are like big, big office buildings. Okay, this thing is massive. It is the biggest open pit mine in the entire world. There's rumors you can see it from space, but I honestly don't know if that's true, but it is massive. So this is on, when you're driving into Salt Lake, it's on the west side of the valley. And so if you look over there, you can see it. It's huge. The picture that's in the middle there, you can see just a normal size vehicle, like a little SUV, compared to those big, huge dump trucks that carry around all of the stuff that they dig out. Now take that big, huge truck to the picture above it and look at how tiny it looks next to that big scoop. Okay, so everything in this mine is massive. The roads are massive. The trucks are massive. Everything is massive. Another thing that you want to pay attention to is that there was a landslide in that top picture. Okay, that landslide looks big, huge, and scary. It was big and huge, but it didn't end up being this really scary thing that trapped people inside because they have such effective tools and seismic activity scales and equipment that they keep there on all the roads that they can actually detect a landslide like 2 or 3 days before it happens because they have such sensitive equipment there. So if they start to detect any movement at all, then they'll clear it out until that happens, then they'll clean it up and move forward. So that's really cool because those safety measures are not something that we're going to see in old mining. Okay, they do copper, silver, gold, stuff like that. The next one we're going to talk about is Park City. Park City actually started as a mining town. The guy who found it, he found a spot when he was back in the mountains working around. And he's like, look at this. This has got silver in it. And so instead of telling anyone, because you don't want to do that, you want to be able to stake your claim so that you can get the money off of that, he tied a red handkerchief on a shrub next to the spot and he left. Well, when he came back with everything that he needed in order to like make a claim and dig and do all of that stuff, he actually found his red handkerchief and he was able to make one of the first mines there. Huge, huge mining town. Huge amounts of people moving there for that. There was a huge amount of alcohol saloons. They called it, they said it was to moisten up the throat. So there was like over 100 saloons in the part at the time, in this part. In 1898, they had this huge fire and 200 out of the 350 buildings in downtown Park City were burned down. So huge, big fire that kind of took them out for a long time. It wasn't until 1946 that they actually started putting in ski resorts, and that bottom picture is a more recent picture there. Okay, last thing we're going to talk about is the miners themselves, the working conditions. Incredibly dangerous. There was no such thing as safety features that kind of guaranteed people's safety. So we had people falling down in the holes, down in these shafts that put you down in. There's all sorts of cave-ins. There was crazy dangerous gases. So what they would do is they would take in birds, the like little songbirds, and if the birds stopped singing, then everyone ran out because they knew that there was poisonous gas, because the birds have a lower threshold than humans do to breathe it. So if the bird dies, you get out or else you'll die shortly after. There's a ton of lung disease that happened from this. And these guys are making $3 to $4 a day, which is okay money for the time, but they're also working 10 to 12 hour days, 6 days a week. Huge groups of immigrants came in and worked this. So there would be groups of Greeks and groups of Italians and huge amounts of immigrants who are moving in. So now all of a sudden Utah's population is going to be a whole lot more diverse.